Good evening. Thank you for coming out in the cold. My name is Lorenzo Bondioli. I am a professor of medieval Islamic history here at Harvard University, and I am truly pleased to welcome you to this talk organized by the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. Can you hear me? Oh, this is better. So let's start this again. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this talk organized by the Center for Middle Eastern Studies here at Harvard and the locally based Friends of Hrant Dink Association. Before I introduce our exceptional speaker, I wanted to hand over the podium for a second to Johannes Kılıçdağı, who is the president of the board of the Friends of Hrant Dink, to say a few words. So, Johannes, please.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm not going to talk long. I just want to say welcome and thank you for joining us today in the names of Hrant Dink, which is a non-governmental organization working to elevate Hrant Dink's memory and ideals here in Boston area. And as a part of that effort and in cooperation with CMES, Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Harvard, every year we organize an Hrant Dink Memorial Lecture in the month of January. And this year it is our honor and pleasure to host our dear friend Garo Paylan for this lecture. And again, before leaving the stage back to Professor Bandioli, let me also thank CMES and especially Liz Flanagan for their efforts to make this event possible. And welcome again. Again, thank you for joining us today for this event, for this Hrant Dink Memorial Lecture. And please, Professor Bandioli, to introduce our guests. Thank you.
It is truly our honor and pleasure. And in a sense, Garo Paylan doesn't require an introduction, but he will get one nonetheless. Garo is a leading opposition voice and a prominent human rights defender and advocate in Turkey. He served in the Turkish parliament for 8 years, from 2015 to June 2023, representing, I believe, Istanbul and Diyarbakir. And he is an internationally recognized for his dedication to democracy and minority rights in Turkey, as well as his advocacy for peace in the South Caucasus. Mr. Paylan has been a strong voice for democratization, which he sees as essential for Turkey to come to terms with its past and the reality of its present. He was one of the very few Armenians ever elected to the Turkish parliament, and the first lawmaker to propose an amendment for the recognition of the Armenian genocide. And throughout his tenure, he consistently emphasized the need for Turkey to confront this historic tragedy, despite facing legal prosecution for this proposal and statements. Now, as a vocal critic of discrimination, Mr. Paylan has drawn attention to abuses against Turkey's Kurdish, Christian, and Jewish minorities, using his platform to advocate for the rights of all minority communities. Before entering parliament, Mr. Paylan served as a coordinator for Armenian schools in Turkey. He was also among the organizers of the commemoration for the Armenian genocide. He's widely regarded as one of Turkey's foremost advocates for democracy and has received several international awards for his work in promoting democracy values. He is currently here in the United States as a visiting scholar with the Europe program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Washington, D.C., where his research focuses on the South Caucasus and Turkey. We are truly, truly honored to have him here in Harvard today, so please join me in welcoming this time our speaker again.
Ladies and gentlemen, merhaba, parev, kumbi hayratin. Hello, I'm honored to be here. It's an honor to stand before you today to reflect on the legacy of Hrant Dink. I had a written text about this lecture, but then today I decided it's not me. No, I cannot read texts. My English not perfect at all. You'll see this. But as my mentor, Hrant Dink, he spoke from his heart, from his heart, and I'll try to do the same thing because I always lectured mostly in Turkish or Armenian. I sometimes lecture in English. It's hard for me, but it is hard to really transfer the emotions. But I'll try to do that now because it is somehow not for me to read a text. So I'll just keep that text aside. Who is Hrant Dink for you? Let's say I see Kurds, Turks, and Armenians, and I guess all of them will have different answers. For Armenians, who was Hrant Dink? And for which Armenians? And I guess different Armenians will have different answers. Because some Armenians, when they saw Hrant just talking about the Armenian genocide, he was a hero. But when he was talking about what about the sufferings of the Azeris? What about the sufferings of the Kurds? What about the centuries that we coexisted together? Some Armenians were not happy with those sentences, I guess. Or for Turks, when he was telling Armenians, you should withdraw from the lands that you conquered from the Azeris. He was a hero. No, because all the Turks just want to see those sentences from Hrant. But when he was vocal about the Armenian genocide, he was a traitor. He could be a traitor for some Turks, for some Kurds, or for the others living in that geography. So there are thousands of Hrants for millions or hundreds of millions of people. And Hrant described his position like this. No, I was on a knife's edge. I could fall this side or that side. If I fall this side, I will upset Armenians, or fall the other side, I might upset the Turks. So he tried to stay on the knife, and it was so difficult. I witnessed this as a member of the Turkish parliament, as a human rights defender, as an Armenian from Turkey. I witnessed this. It was the hardest, really, task. You have to pick every word that comes from your mouth. You have to, because every word might hurt Turks, might hurt Armenians. So you have to weigh every word comes from your mouth. So I witnessed this. But you know, during my service in the Turkish parliament, I always felt the headwinds. And during Hrant, when he was alive, he sometimes felt the tailwinds. He enjoyed it. And unfortunately, especially his last 3 years, he always felt the headwinds. And that assassination was coming. And maybe he felt it, but as an optimist, he wanted to go on. That was a question for Hrant. He was a romantic, actually. He was a romantic. He wanted to change Turkey. He wanted to make Turkey a democracy. He was a romantic. You might call him naive. Yes, he was kind of naive. But he knew that that was the only way for his grandchildren not to suffer the things that he suffered. His grandfather suffered. He knew that. He wanted to live in Turkey. He wanted his children and grandchildren to live in Turkey. That is why he had to go on. I begged Hrant Dink to leave Turkey. I was one of the people because I was feeling it. It was coming. Every day we were feeling it, that assassination was coming, and anytime it can happen. I begged him to leave just a week before the assassination. He didn't listen to me. Then when he was assassinated, I was so angry at myself. Why didn't you insist more, Garo? Why didn't you insist more? Then I walked through that again. I just had the same question, to live or to leave. So many people told me to leave my country. Garo, they are going to kill you as well. You have to be silent. To be silent or to be vocal? That was the dilemma. And being silent, I had this question. To be silent would make you secure? Or being silent is worse than being vocal? Which one? That was the dilemma that Hrant, Dink was faced, and I witnessed that as well. I walked through that. Because you have a responsibility. You think that you can change this country. But no, there was a window of opportunity in Turkey. It was a real window of opportunity. I went all over the world after Hrant Dink's assassination. Look, Hrant Dink had a dream. And that dream was very beautiful. And there is still a window of opportunity. All the Armenians, Turks, and Kurds need to benefit from this. Armenians were skeptical. And they had all the right to be skeptical. But I urged them, this window can close. And unfortunately, after 2015, that window closed. That window opened in 1990s. And when Hrant Dink felt the first air coming from that window, he stepped in. He had that courage because Turkey had a European Union process. That process has started. Kurds were asking for their rights and other minorities were asking for their rights. And we were repressed. We were silent for 3 generations. He was my hero. No, I don't like that word really, being hero, but he was the only hero that I had in my life. He was my mentor. Why? I am sure you can use the same word, because he gave, first of all, my name back. You know what? When I was 4 years old, I remember that day very well. My name is Garo, of course. My mom took me to a doctor. And on the way to the doctor, my mom said, Garo, today your name is Kaya. And you are not going to call me Mama. You are going to call me Anne. When we are going somewhere, you will call me Anne. My name is Sirarpi, but my name is Serpilder, and your name will be Kaya. I said, okay. It hurt me, but I said, okay. I understood that was the rule to survive there. Then my father took me to his job. I know my father's, I taught him Hayrik at home, but he said, you're going to call me Baba, and my name is Halister instead of Avedis. I understood that something is different. We are somehow, our identity is not something normal in that land. So I used that, unfortunately, name Kaya for more than a decade. Hrant also changed his name. I guess some of you know that. His name was Fırat. No, people called him Fırat. Then he started to use his name. Then when he started to talk about the things that we suffered, when he had the courage to talk about that we are not traders, we used to live here for 4,000 years, and something bad has happened in this land. He started to talk about it. And with its courage, with using our names, being in the public space with our names and with our identity, and I had the courage to use my name as well in the public space. Second of all, as I said, we were sentenced. No, of course, they killed us. We were massacred. But the ones that died, other than, of course, we are just fighting for justice for them. But there were hundreds of thousands of people who survived after that genocide. But they were sentenced to silence. And I was one of them as well. Because people were talking about Armenians, even during my high school or the primary school, teachers were telling about, Armenians were traitors. They betrayed us, so we had to send them away. And people were turning their faces to me because I was the tallest. I was sitting at the back of the classroom. Everybody was looking at me. Garo, what did you do? What did your grandparents do? No? That was what we were feeling, and we could not talk about it. Even we talked, there was a hegemony of Armenians calling Armenians traitors, even using Armenian identity as a swear word. They didn't need to use any other word than Armenian. Just saying, you are an Armenian, it was enough to swear at somebody. So Hrant Dink really, in Turkey, saved us from this. And third of all, Hrant Dink just told to the people that we coexisted for centuries. Turks, Kurds, Armenians, Greeks, we used to coexist. We were not always enemies. We did not always kill each other. We had to find a way to live together. This was very important. And it normalized our identity. And more important than that, he made people understand that Armenians were the part of this land, and they used to coexist. Because Gerard Liberian is here. He's an historian, as you know. Historians sometimes does this. They just write the history of the history that they believe in. They don't write the history that really exists. They want to, let's say, Turkish historians want to make people believe that Armenians were betrayers. That is it. They betrayed us and we sent them away. They write nothing about the coexistence, the contributions for thousands of years, Armenians, how they contributed to that civilization, nothing about it. When I was going to high school, there was only one sentence, as I said, Armenians betrayed us, that is it. But what about the Armenians, that coexistence, that the civilization that we built together? Nothing about it. And some Armenian historians does the same thing as well. They want people to believe that from Zov to Zov Hayastan, that is it. That's what they want to believe. And Turks massacred us, and that is it. They have to pay the price of it. They don't want to hear anything else than that. They don't want to hear, just show that Armenians and Turks and Kurds and Greeks and coexisted together. Because that history is all about people-to-people attraction and people-to-people contradictions. It is all about that. And of course, there were so many problems, but there were so many good days as well. As you know, people-to-people relations are all about interactions and contradictions. Sometimes you fight with your neighbors. Sometimes you just make peace with your neighbors. Sometimes you just take and give and take from your neighbors. Let's say the Armenian culture. What is Armenian culture? How can you define it? What is Greek culture? What is the Kurdish culture, Turkish culture? What is that? How can you just explain me that Armenian culture is this and Turkish culture is this? What is Armenian history, Turkish history, Kurdish history? What is that? Can you write Armenian history without Kurds or without Turks, without Greeks, or vice versa? Can you do that? We need to, Hrant Dink really was volunteered to explain this, that we coexisted together, because the music that he was enjoying was the music that Kurds enjoyed as well, Turks enjoyed as well. The food that we were enjoying, that had the influence from Arabs, Turks, Kurds, and Greeks. Now, we do dolma, that our way, but Arabs does dolma as well. Kurds does in different regions of Anatolia with different types, but we just give and take from others. That is how we build our culture together. And he just made people believe that this is the reality. And the problem, and one more big problem, there was one more big problem with the Turks, because Turks believed in this. Let me tell you about this. I went to military service, and I was doing my service with a young boy, with a young soldier in an office. I was doing the paperwork, and he was doing the office job. One day, he ran into my office, and he told me, "Garo, you know what they told you about you?" And I said, "What did they tell you about me?" They said, "You are an Armenian." I punched in their face. No. I said, "I am an Armenian." And he really fainted at that point. Literally fainted just there. And I just went there, what is going on? And he said, "Garo, how can you be an Armenian? You are a good guy." That is what he said. That is what he believed in. That is what he was taught. Because what he was taught was Armenians were betrayers, and Armenians are something like evil. And Hrant Dink really dismantled that idea. He made people, because he was eating the kuru fasulye, do you understand me, with onion, just breaking this onion like other people did, in Turkey. So he was laughing like others, crying like others. He had empathy with the others. So that was a big threat to the establishment. That is why they killed Hrant. That is the answer. Because he was like an icebreaker ship. As you know, that ice was frozen for 100 years, 90 years. He broke that ice because there was a vicious cycle. And Turkish establishment was very happy with that vicious cycle. Whenever Armenians from here, let's say, I'm not criticizing them, was just telling Turks are this, Turks are that, Turks are genocidal, they were very happy, believe me. Whenever Turkish diplomats were assassinated here, of course, they might not be so happy, but they benefited from that. Believe me, they benefited from that because they needed that Armenian identity to keep in the Turkish nation throughout the Turkish nation as an enemy. And they benefited from that card. Because after the genocide, they just sentenced us with silence, of course. But from the diaspora, when diaspora just behaved like an outsider, other than being from somebody from Turkey, I'm sure most of your ancestors are from Antep, Malatya, Maraş. Tell me, is there anybody from Maraş, Malatya, Antep, Urfa here, or other cities? Most of us are from there. But they wanted the diasporan Kurds, Turks, and Armenians to behave like an outsider. And they wanted them, because as you know, nowadays they are just saying, oh, the Armenians that we have are good, but diaspora is bad. Diaspora is the evil. They don't want anything good for you, Turkish citizens. That's their propaganda. Then They believed in this. Coming back to January 19, 2007. My father died so early, and I had to follow the family business, and half of my life was dedicated to the Armenian community as I was just responsible for the Armenian schools, and the other half was going for the family business. And I had a telephone call, and I found myself in front of Agos. I saw Hrant lying on the pavement, and it was not a surprise for me, unfortunately. That is what I felt, as I said. And thousands of people started to shout, "We are all Hrant, we are all Armenians." That was maybe a surprise for the greater community. And that night, about 100,000 Armenians gathered in front of Agos. And you know what? Hrant was really isolated. I have to tell this. Not only from there, of course, there were some supporters, intellectuals, Hrant, Dink, but what I witnessed there was, I went there in 10, 15 minutes. I went up to Agos. There were only 2, 3 people there, and they were so young, and there were nobody to take care of the people coming there. And I took that mission. I called my brother, I'm not coming back, and I stayed there for at least 6 months, day and night. And what I felt was, really, we all are responsible for with Hrant Dink's death, because we didn't take care of him. He was so much isolated. He was a target. And of course, we should, as Turkish people, we should have taken care of him more. But from the world, I can say, let's say, Hrant Dink came to United States, let's say, some months before his death. And I was in LA, let's say, last 6 months ago. And some Armenians, of course, most of them applauded me. They still see me as a hero. But some Armenians told me or shouted at me as Erdogan's whatever. I'm not going to use that word. And they told, how much is Erdogan paying you to talk like this? Some of them, of course. You know what? Some Armenians approached me and told me they did the same thing to Hrant. They used the same words because he was talking about peace and reconciliation, and he was not welcomed in so many Armenian organizations, and he was isolated as well from the Armenian community. So, as Armenians, why do we prefer an Armenian only suffering? That is the question. Why? Of course, we want this problem to be resolved. Of course, we all want this wound to be healed. Of course, because that wound is still open, and we want this wound to be healed. But what is the right approach? Hrant Dink was really showing that approach, because for decades, we have been struggling for this, to find justice for the Armenian genocide. I have full respect for our efforts, really, and I'm sure Hrant Dink had that respect as well. But whatever we did not heal our wound. You see, Mr. Biden, President Biden, just recognized the Armenian genocide. Didn't he? Yes, he did. But did it heal our wound? Can anybody here say that President Biden recognizing the Armenian genocide healed our wound? I don't think so. Or 60 other states. Of course, those are important steps, but I just introduced a bill to the Turkish parliament saying that the only parliament which can heal the wounds of the Armenian genocide is the Turkish parliament. It was okay in 2015. It was okay in 2016, 17, somehow. They just maybe turned a blind eye on it. And 18, but in 2019 or 2020, I don't remember, they lynched me for this. There were legal cases. What I am trying to say is this. When you find window of opportunities, you need to really take care of those windows, because those windows open and close. And Hrant was that window for us. And of course, that window is not opened by only Hrant. He benefited from that window. He urged Armenians, Turks, and Kurds to find a solution to this, to move forward. But unfortunately, most of us, including Armenians, of course, were biased. And we have all the right to be biased. But this is the question. Do we have the right to transfer this conflict to our children and grandchildren? That is the question. And does this help us? Did Mr. Biden's recognizing Armenian genocide stop the Artsakh genocide? Did it stop it? No, it did not. Mr. Biden did not even lift a finger. And I'm sure Mr. Trump or Mr. Rubio is not going to lift a finger if Azerbaijan attacks Armenia today. You think that, do you still think that we are Christians and they are going to help us after these kind of, during the Armenian genocide, during the Artsakh genocide, during so many catastrophes? Oh, we are Christians, they are going to come and help us. Some people are still promoting this. Mr. Rubio is a Christian and he's going to be there, and Trump is somebody like that, or they are going to just stand for us. Mr. Trump was the president in 2020. He didn't even lift his finger. Yesterday, Mr. Rubio just told this sentence, used this sentence. He said, US foreign policy is going to be 100% based on national interests. That is it, national interest. It was always like that. The others were 5%, 8%, 10%, being a Christian, being a democracy, being an ally, or this or that. But now he said 100% national interest. What kind of national interest do we have to show Mr. Trump for him to lift his finger, to stop Aliyev, to attack Armenia today? This is the question. This is the question that Hrant would ask. I'm asking this question to you. We are a Christian nation. So we need to really think about those issues. And this is another dark era. Of course, we came here to just talk about Hrant's legacy. But we are so far away from Hrant's dream. So far away. The world is so far away. Man, Mr. Trump is just talking about, what about I take Panama Canal or Greenland, even Canada? What about Canada? Don't you think Mr. Aliyev is eyeing this? I'm sure he's eyeing. Whatever. If United States says whatever about Panama or appeases Mr. Putin about Ukraine, and Aliyev eyes this and attacks Armenia. Or Israel, when Israel is just committing a kind of a genocide, some people call it genocide, I call it a genocide. Who's going to just put pressure on Turkey to just recognize the genocide which has been committed 110 years ago? Who's going to just? I don't think anybody would do that. Because there is no moral authority to shame the other. Unfortunately, this is a totally dark era. There is no moral authority to say that I am the right, I have the moral authority, and you are doing something wrong. So what I want to tell is this. We need to come to the terms. Armenia is at stake now. If we want our soft plight to be our last plight, we need to act. Because Hrant Dink just was working on this, talking on this, writing on this, he was telling that if your identity, if your existence is based on the hatred you feel against another identity, your identity is sick. I agree, I fully agree. Of course, we want Turks to recognize the genocide, but that soldier that fainted is still believing that Armenians are this or that. Armenians killed, because Turkish media is every day talking about, no, Armenians are this, Armenians are that. What would you expect from that Turk to reconcile the Armenian genocide? Even if nobody would put pressure on Turkey, even if somebody puts pressure on Turkey to recognize genocide in return of economic or whatever thing, would it mean anything? Because Hrant Dink told, first they need to understand what we suffered. So if this is a dark era, we need to come to the terms, and we need to understand that no, this is the era of saving, deterring coming catastrophes, first of all. If you can't deter the coming catastrophes, you cannot ask for the reconciliation of the catastrophes happened in the past. This requires might. Unfortunately, in this dark era, of course, it was always like that, I guess, but might will be right. 100%. It was 90%, 80%, whatever. Whoever has the right, had the right. But this now, if Mr. Trump says Panama or Greenland, Putin says, I take Ukraine, and Israel says, no more Gaza, I can do whatever I want in Gaza or West Bank, and everybody turns a blind eye on it, forget about it. So what should be our task? What would of course, I cannot talk in behalf of Hrant Dink, but I believe, because we were friends, we were always together, we were always working together. If Hrant Dink was alive today, he would do everything to convince Armenians all over the world to do their best to deter the coming catastrophe. I was in Yerevan. Wherever you walk, you see soldiers, young people who were born 20 years ago, in 2001, and 2, they don't have their arms and legs. We lost 4,000 soldiers and so many casualties. And do we have right to just wait for another catastrophe? But what I'm feeling is this, unfortunately, we are just waiting because we don't want to come to the terms. We have to come to the terms. We lost that war. We won a war 30 years ago. It caused so many, of course, sufferings in the, of course, in Armenians, we suffered that before that war in Sumgait, in Baku and others, but Azeris suffered as well. We thought we won that war, but we didn't win the peace. And we thought everything would go like this forever because Russians were on our side. What happened? Russians said, I endorsed Armenians for 3 decades. Now it is time to endorse Azeris. What about? It is all about what about, as you know. Some countries endorse, let's say Erdogan plays this game very well. He goes to Washington, benefits from Washington, goes to Moscow and others. Aliyev learned this game very well. So we relied on Russia. We thought everything would go forever like this, but they said it's not a betrayal. In the international affairs, things are like this. You are only a card in their hand. Putin has 50 cards. What if I drop this card and take another card? That is as easy as this. So I believe what we should rely on is really our might, our power, our strategic thinking. Unfortunately, we don't have a strategic thinking. It is terrible to talk like this in a very emotional guys, commemoration, but we should really stop being so emotional. Of course, I'm emotional. I wasn't emotional, but I'm a realist now because I suffered a lot. We suffered a lot. We need to have a strategic thinking. to deter the coming, of course, threats. Hrant Dink was convincing, really convincing. And whenever he went into a hall, I witnessed this, he could convince the hardliner Turks. And as I said, that is why I guess he was so much dangerous for the Turkish establishment. I'm just looking at my notes. I'm sorry. I want to come to one more point. You know, I was a college student in Turkey, and we just established a club to go for hiking all over Turkey. And we decided to go to the Black Sea region. And we were walking in the mountains, and we went to a village. And there were people in a cafe. And I sat there, and people were talking, and I was understanding them. There was a dialect, but I was understanding them, what they were speaking. I just started talking in the language that they were speaking. I said parev. They said barev. And we started talking, and I said, no, how can you know this language? And they said, your Hampshire language is somehow different. Why do you speak this way? They started to tell about it. I said, this is not Hampshire language, this is Armenian. And they said, no, this is not Armenian. This is the language that we learned, whatever. And it was a shock for both sides, really, because they knew that it was Armenian, but they were not ready to just accept that. But it was the first time I just saw people with Islam, just with beards and everything, and they were just talking Armenian. And it was a shock for me, because I knew nothing about it. Then I continued just these voyages. I saw people talking, an Armenian in Mush, Bitlis, one in the Black Sea region, others, and I started reading about it, and I understood that before the Armenian genocide, for centuries, at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions, hundreds of Armenians were converted to Islam. Not only about a grandmother or grandfather issue, village by village, let's say communities, were converted to Islam. And it was a reality for me. And second of all, during the genocide, maybe hundreds of thousands of orphans were taken by the families and were raised. And when I became the MP of Diyarbakir, wherever I go, people come and whisper in my ear, you know what? My grandmother is an Armenian. My grandmother is an Armenian. Now they say only one in every 100. I heard about the grandfather issue. They all took to girls, unfortunately. No, my grandmother is an Armenian. In almost every family, there was a grandmother issue. So this means we had relatives before the genocide who were converted to Islam, and during the genocide, there were hundreds of thousands who became the members of other Kurdish or Turkish families. This means they are our families. But when it comes to Armenian patriarchy, let's say, I really struggled about this. Armenian patriarchy in Turkey told me this, because I went there, look, there are hundreds of thousands of Armenians, and they're asking about their identity. What should I do? They want to send their kids to the Armenian school, some of them. And the patriarch told me, of course, he was just an acting patriarch, said, whoever is not a Christian cannot be an Armenian. What he told was this. Hrant Dink really just struggled about this as well. So he said they were forced to be converted to Islam, or they chose to convert to Islam. You cannot say whoever is not a Christian cannot be an Armenian. This was another struggle that we gave. And third of all, there were, of course, the Armenians massacred, but they were Armenians who chose to stay in Turkey, whose religion is a Christian religion. I am one of the third generation representative of that Christians who just chose to stay in Turkey. No, that dilemma, to live or to leave, really it was the biggest dilemma of these three generations. Most of you might know this. No, when I was a kid, I had so many cousins. When we cousins gathered, there were 30, 35 kids. But every month, some of them were leaving. I remember that they were just preparing their luggages, and we were taking to the airport, and they were leaving. Between 1970s and 75s to 1985, I guess, we lost, let's say, half of our community. Before that, there were another moments like this. So some of them chose to leave or forced to leave the country, but we chose to stay. And there are, as I said, we only focus on the people who were massacred in 1915. But before that, there is a huge history. There were Armenians who had relations with the other communities, coexistence histories. Some of them converted to Islam, but they were still feeling that they were Armenians. There were Armenians who became members of other Turkish or Kurdish families. There were Armenians who chose to leave the country, and there were Armenians who chose to stay with its religion and repressed, of course. There are so many stories with these group of Armenians. But no, we never really wanted to maybe deal with the other Armenians. Or let's say, maybe this is our fate. We needed to show some solutions to the Turkish state and the Turkish community. How to reconcile? Hrant Dink tried to do that as well. He told this, and I offered the same bill to the Turkish parliament, saying that, we had 3,000 churches throughout Anatolia, and there are still remains of the 1,000 of them. There are still, and at least 500 of them can be saved. If you renovate those churches, it might be a way to say sorry. And with my efforts, we renovated some of them, or our other friends' efforts, and Hrant Dink tried so hard on it. But sometimes we feel, those kind of steps, we don't give any credit for that, especially the diasporan Armenians, what I believe. Because still, I'm just going to repeat this, because I heard this from my relatives whenever I came here. Don't misunderstand me with this sentence, because my relative used this sentence. He regretted to leave Turkey, of course, because he didn't want to. But my uncle had to leave, or chose to leave Turkey. And he said, Garo, it was the early 2000s, you are doing better, and I feel bad. You are doing better, and I feel bad. And I feel bad because I left Turkey. I said, you can come back. How can I come back? I left Turkey decades ago. So sometimes we believe, because I went to the US Congress, let's say, do I have time, by the way? Okay. Last year, I had to leave my country. This is another heavy reality. There were three choices, because there were so many assassination attempts. I could be assassinated. And there were so many assassination attempts. There were confessions about that. And the second option, the biggest option maybe, to be jailed or to leave my country. And my friends just convinced me to leave, because you don't have the right to make your nation live this trauma. And I am technically in exile now. But I'm still keeping my struggle from Washington, D.C. I'm working with the rational Turks, rational Armenians, and rational Turks, and with the Armenian government and Turkish parliament to establish peace in the region. But last year, I went to the commemoration of the Armenian genocide in the US Congress. What I saw, what I witnessed was this. People gathered in a hall, because for me, commemoration is something emotional, really. And people were coming, going, laughing, and they had nothing to do with the Armenian genocide. They came there, they said, we love Armenians. And what the senators and the Congress people told was, you know, we just filed that Article 907. And all the Armenians were applauding. And the other senators come, Article 907, and people were I said, what is this Article 907? Of course, I knew it. It was the US aid to Azerbaijan, which was about $40 million a year. 40, not billion, $1 million a year. And for us, the bar was that. No, the goal was that, to hurt Azerbaijan, $40 million. That was it. And Azerbaijan, of course, is just making a campaign about it, saying that, look, Armenians want to hurt us, and they stopped this bill. $40 million. If it was something, of course, I would, of course, might applaud that as well. But $40 million is only a one-day revenue of Aliyev from natural gas or oil. And we are applauding it. So this is why I believe 2 million Armenians living here can do better, much better. Bar shouldn't be this low. Let's say 8 million Jews are living here. Let's say we are a quarter of them, but we don't even have 0.1% of their influence over the US system. Why is that? Don't tell me we are as clever as them. I believe in that. We have very influential people. We have great entrepreneurs, intellectuals, and we suffered just like them. No? So what is the problem? We need to think about it. And Hrant Dink asked us to think about it. What he proposed was this. Stop just trying to just target Turks. Just forget about this Turk as an enemy. Just try to think that Turk identity as a neighbor and focus on Armenia. That is what we need to do. That is what Hrant urged us to do. Focus on Armenia. Focus on a strong Armenia. And that is what he proposed. But unfortunately, we still, our first goal is, because we sometimes think whatever is bad for Turks, or if something is bad for Turks, it's good for Armenians. Hrant Dink taught just the opposite. He said, whatever is good for Turks, it is good for Armenians as well. Because when Turkish democracy was getting better, we benefited from that. We could talk about Armenian genocide. We could talk about equality. But whenever Turkish democracy deteriorated during the last 10 years, we suffered so many catastrophes again, including the Artsakh catastrophe. So I believe we need to again think about it. Should we keep thinking that whatever is bad for Turks is good for Armenians? Or should we think whatever is good for Armenians and Turks together is good for the nation, for the region? And even, of course, we are so far away from this thinking. We used to coexist with the Azeris. It is not about Azeri people. It is about the regime in Baku who is poisoning them with hatred. We coexisted with Azeris Nagorno-Karabakh, Arsa. So many Armenians forget about it. We coexisted with them, and we should have this dream to coexist together. It might be seen so far away, but French and Germans used to believe like that. They fought for centuries, maybe. They hated each other. Now they are coexisting. Even their borders are open. So we should have this dream as well. Hrant Dink's dream was the Turkish-Armenian border to be open. Some Armenians are skeptical about it. It's understandable, of course. But God's maybe, or whatever, our fate is still we are neighbors. Turkey and Armenia, they are neighbors. I don't have big hopes about Turkish democracy, but I have big hopes about that border opening. If we can just broker that peace with Azerbaijan and open that border, the risks against Armenia will mitigate. And people-to-people attraction is really the biggest, most important thing now, because Turkish establishment benefits from this. And if we engage with the people, make trade with the people, cultural relations, diplomatic relations, people-to-people relations, we will mitigate that enemy vicious cycle going on between us. I think this is the most important thing now. If we want to just do something for Hrant Dink's legacy, we should be in favor of opening that border. And I proposed another bill to the Turkish parliament saying that border's name should be Hrant Dink. That border's name should be Hrant Dink. But unfortunately, Hrant Dink's name is not that much important in the other side of the border as well. That is what I witnessed. Armenians living in Armenia, of course, they were so sorry when he was massacred, this or that, but they only said 1.15 million plus one. That was it for maybe for them. But I guess from the other side of the border, from Armenia, from the diaspora, we should really underline this and have that dream to have that border open and to have people-to-people relations. To conclude, Turkish nation building process is still being going on, unfortunately, because Talat Pasha and Enver Pasha, before that, young Turks have said, we lost the empire. This is the last land we have, but we need to build a nation just like all the nation states did. All the nation states committed crimes, but Turkish state thought, here we have the Christians. It is not suitable for the nation that we have dreamt of, so we have to get rid of them. For the last century, they have been repressing Kurds, and still that nation building process has been going on. And during that window of opportunity, when that window was open, we had chance to just change Turkish democracy. But now, unfortunately, in this dark era, our expectations should not be that high. But what we can do is at least deter the massacres which could be happened against the Kurds, or deter a war which could be implemented against Armenia. This should be our goal, I guess, and that nation-building process might cause other plights when the world would most probably turn a blind eye on it. To conclude, some more sentences I'm just going to use. I'm sorry to just extend my speech. Hrant Dink once wrote, if you do not have freedom, it is your responsibility to fight for it. But if you do have freedom, it is your duty to defend it. Turkey and the entire world is so far away, really, from Hrant Dink's dream. And I guess we should, but this is the bad news. But the good news is, still in Turkey and in the world, there are hundreds of thousands, millions of tens of millions of people who are ready to struggle for it. So we have no right to be depressed about the situation. Of course, the situation is harsh, but the good news is struggle is going on, Hrant. Thank you very much.
Questions now. So we'll put it out of the room, and then there are some perhaps online questions as well. But let's start with at the very back. A microphone is coming your way.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Paylan. I'm also a Turkish Armenian, and I just want to point out an addition to your comments about the different experiences of us as Turkish Armenians, even if we are abroad, of having experienced living with other Turkish people and you know, a lot of times appreciating our new country, but missing our birthplace. And then there are the people whose grandparents escaped the genocide and they grew up here. And for them, I think some people have observed even some sense of jealousy that they don't have the ways of the old country. So for them, their American identity and doing things with the American way of justice is of primary importance. So for them, Biden's statement means a lot. And then in terms of Armenia, there is a disconnect there also, and I don't know how, you know, we all want, I think, Armenia to exist. But then there are so many cultural differences, even with Turkish Armenians. The language, the dialect is different. It's like, it's a different, so how to overcome that difference and, you know, what steps to take? Thank you.
You know, Armenians from Halep and Syria suffered another catastrophe, as you know, 10 years ago, and they about 100,000 of them moved to Armenia. And really, no, if you go, I don't know if you went to Armenia recently, so many things changed because there is Areveliya, Aremutki, Hayastan, Mushaguydu. Yeah, two cultures, Western Armenian, Eastern Armenian cultures. They just created a hybrid culture there now with the Syrian Armenians, I believe. It's really, the Syrian Armenians contributed so much to the Armenia's culture. And I believe that land is enough for, really sufficient for 10 million Armenians all over the world. And we should have dream to really live there. And even that language difference is not that big now, because there is another hybrid language as well, and hybrid culture and hybrid food culture. The food that the Halep Armenians brought to Armenia contributed to the food culture of Armenia greatly, or music or other cultures. I believe that gap is not big now, and all the Armenians all over the world can contribute to Armenia, not only as a tourist, because sometimes you go, Horovats, this and that, and great, and you go and you come back. I don't mean that. We all have to think how, I don't know your profession, but how can I contribute to Armenia? If you're a teacher, a doctor, a nurse, or engineer working in the Silicon Valley, yeah, you can think, Armenia is at stake. Okay, it's at stake. Israel was at stake, and so many Jews just contributed to that idea, and they created a strong Israel. Of course, I'm not in favor of so many things that Israel is doing now, but if somebody hits Israel once, they hit million times back. Nobody, yeah. So we should be for that. You need to have a strong economy first of all. You need to have a strong army, and you need to have a strong, statehood and state culture. We have neither of them, unfortunately. We are building on that, but we need to contribute that if you want a strong Armenia. And you can, I'm sure now, wherever I go there, I start to use the Arev Mutki Hayrana, easily. It's so easy enough. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Sheikh Musa. I'm a Kurd from Turkey.
Serserim.
I just want to thank you, first of all. And secondly, so this message of love and reconciliation and working together and understanding each other as a neighbor, the concept was addressed in the United States for like Martin Luther King, and also in India we have examples around the world. However, I am a clinician. I've studied, I've looked at it, from Black Lives Matters movements, from Martin Luther King's movement, from Gandhi's movement. The message of wanting or knowing reconciliation is all in the Constitution. The Turkish Constitution is one of the racist constitutions in the world, and it doesn't recognize the existence of Armenians in Turkey, doesn't recognize the existence of Kurds in Turkey. So how this message of love is being like I don't want to call it romanticism. You've lived it. I have lived it as well. But how this is, after we lost him, we can't even have a center for him. Like you're saying, his message is being taught. Like we don't even know what his message was, so we can follow.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Thank you. You know what? U.S. Constitution is 250 years old, I guess, almost. But only some decades ago, African Americans were still repressed in the United States, or the Indian Americans, let's say. So even if you have the best constitution in the world, let's say U.S. Constitution is really somehow a good constitution, but look where we are. A president says, I'm just going to throw millions of people from here. And so many discriminative narrative against the LGBT community, transgenders. So Constitution now means something, but it's not everything. Struggle is everything. If you struggle for your rights, if you have the rights, as Hrant said, you need to struggle for your rights. If you don't have the rights, again, and you know what? Hrant said something like this: I don't want to go to ready heavens. I want to make my country as an heaven. And this requires a fight, and fight is good. Fight for, and so I believe, even if you write the best constitution in the world, you need to fight for that to be implemented. If you don't have the worst constitution in the world, but the reality is different. Let's say sometimes Turkey's constitution was not good, but between 1995 to 2015, we lived that window of opportunity, and we had hopes. So I believe whatever is written on the Constitution is somehow important, but more important thing is the struggle. And the struggle is not that strong, but it's still been going on. This is the reality. And Kurds are struggling. Some Democrat Turks are struggling. This struggle is important. If there is no struggle, look, Mr. Trump just offered so many things, and I don't see any protests in the United States. Can you believe in that? Against the LGBTQ rights, transgender rights, even the immigrants coming here. US is an immigrant community, and he's saying, I am just going to throw out millions of people, and there is no protest, there is no struggle. Believe me, he has the American oligarchs now. I walked through this. Erdogan has the Turkish oligarchs. Putin has the Russian oligarchs. I walked through this. I lived this. And he is just following the same playbook. I know what is going to happen next if you don't struggle about this as Americans. Thank you.
Very powerful words. I want to hope that we will rise. I have a question actually from the chat, from Fatma. Thank you for a wonderful talk. You have so enriched the legacy of Hrant globally. I'd like you to comment, if possible, on the similarities between the precarity of the Kurds in Turkey today and the precarity of the Armenians and the Armenian genocide a century ago.
Yeah. Whenever Turkey, some official from Turkey proposes, let's say, a reconciliation process or peace process, my fears really go deeper. Because we walked through this as well as Armenians. Starting with 1820s, there were so many offers and so many reform offerings, but whenever they offered some reform, it followed by a massacre. You can walk through this. Gerard Liberian is here. He can tell you about this, And unfortunately, after the 1908, let's say, about the second constitution of the Ottomans, we just suffered 1909, Adana massacre and other massacres. And in 1914, even Talat Pasha and Enver Pasha offered reforms. And we said, oh, we are with Turkey and we are just going to... But it followed the Armenian genocide. And unfortunately, Turkish state doesn't know how to reconcile, how to make peace. They don't have this culture. We were vulnerable 100 years ago, and still we are vulnerable. And Kurds are vulnerable now. Because, let's say, 10 years ago, the world believed, oh, Kurds are fighting against ISIS. Female fighters, and everyone was talking about it. But then they turned a blind eye on it. Now even terrorist Jolani is Mr. Jolani, Mr. President Jolani. For them, it's okay for them, for their interests. So, and Kurds have no right, and Turkey is about to start another peace process. But I guess now the bar will be very low. And for Mr. Abdullah Öcalan, he is just doing these negotiations from the İmralı prison. I believe he's trying to deter another massacre, first of all. And if we can achieve that goal, that will be a big goal. Because, if you have the people, I guess during the Armenian genocide, what we forgot about this was this. We need to save the people. If you can save your people, let's say, if you could, our goal should be to save people in Artsakh. Keep the people in Artsakh. Maybe 10 years later, 20 years later, Artsakh people could have their rights. But if you just make them massacred or forced to flee there, then who is going to ask for their rights? Let's say Kurds in Afrin. Let's say they asked for their rights, but they had forced them to flee Afrin in Syria. Now, who is going to ask for their rights? If they massacred the Kurds in Kobani, let's say, who's going to ask for their rights, even if Turkey becomes a democracy 30 years later? So keeping the nation there is the biggest goal now in this dark era. That's what I believe. If that outcome happens, that would be the great thing.
Was there a question there? Actually, I'll go to you first.
First of all, thank you so much for your talk. I found it incredibly refreshing. My questions for you are, what are some effective ways that young Armenians can live out the message that Hrant Dink was lived his whole life conveying? And do you think that calling the international attention to our suffering is a wasted effort?
No, it's not a wasted effort. No, I never meant that. Don't misunderstand me. Because, no, what I'm telling is this. We put 90%, 95% of our energy to the past for a century. Most of our energy. We should have put most of our energy for the future. We will never forget. But it is not about us. We will never forget. Hrant Dink told this. It is a burden we need to carry with honor. Of course, we will ask Turks to recognize it. But if they don't recognize it, it is their problem. It is not our problem. If they then don't recognize it, they will be blamed as the perpetrators of the Armenian genocide. Not only the Turkish state, because of the denial, they will be just claimed as the perpetrators of the Armenian genocide. So what Hrant Dink proposed was this. He said, I don't want my neighbors to carry this burden. You need to save yourself from this burden. You shouldn't be the grandchildren of Talat Pasha or Enver Pasha. You should be the grandchildren of the other important figures in the Turkish history. So we should follow the same path. We are the sisters or brothers of Hrant Dink. We should follow Hrant Dink's path, saying that we will never forget Armenian genocide. But we should not just got stuck in it. We should move forward. We should, if you don't have a future, you will never ever find justice in the past. If you don't build your nation strong, your army strong, your country strong, your culture strong, and interact with other nations, you will never ever be an important actor in the world. So this was Hrant Dink's proposal, and I'm trying to continue this proposal. Just don't get stuck in this is not the time for it. We should put 95% of our energy to the future, because Armenia is at stake now, and this is a dark era. So many nations are committing genocides and massacres, and it will happen, unfortunately, in this dark era. There will be wars, there will be massacres. Nobody will care about the genocide which happened 110 years ago. We will never forget, we will always care, but it is up to Turks. If they recognize it, it will be a really, they will also get rid of this burden. But it is up to them. But we might carry this burden for some more years. We carried this for 110 years. We can carry it for centuries more, but no, we shouldn't get stuck there. Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much, Mr. Pailan. My question was about what's going on in Syria right now. It's a two-parter question. First off is, with this Turkish-backed government, what do you think life will be like for the remaining Syrians in Armenia? And second of all, what do you think the political implications are for the South Caucasus with Turkey taking down a Russian-backed government? Thank you.
It will be the same that, whatever we are living in Turkey, the Armenians in Syria will live the same things, I guess. Because last time, as you know, they massacred some Christians, the jihadists, I mean. This time they are very careful. And I'm sure Erdogan government want them to behave with the Christians, because then they started massacring the Christians, then US and the Western powers started to bomb them. It wasn't about Kurds, maybe only, mostly about the Christians. And of course, about countering ISIS. ISIS started to just bomb the Western capitals. So I guess whatever we are living in Turkey, the same will be happening in Syria. And if you became in Turkey, if you stay silent, you can live in Turkey. But if you ask for justice, for equality, and it is unacceptable, unfortunately. That is what we dare to do, and that's what we will continue to do. But it's unacceptable for the Turkish regime. And Syrian regime is following the same playbook, unfortunately. And even if the new regime pragmatically wants to take some steps, establishing an inclusive government, Turkey will not leave that happen, including some Arab governments as well, because they don't want a role model in the Arab world as a democracy. Because Saudis and UAE just says, I'm just going to give you money, but I don't want any democracy there. You shouldn't be a role model there. The same thing goes for the Turks as well. Your second question was, I'm sorry.
The broader political implications on the South Caucasus with Turkey taking down a Russian-backed government.
Of course, there's Armenia is at stake. Why? Because Russians are now greenlighting Turks or Azeris to put more pressure on Armenia. And I have deep concerns because Iran is on her back foot now, and Israel sees this as an historic opportunity to attack Iran. And anytime this can happen, and Aliyev might see it as a pretext to attack Armenia. So Armenia is at real stake. But I don't understand the silence has been going on among the Armenians. This kind of, even if this possibility is 10%, I believe it is more than 50%. That 10% is a great percentage. We cannot dare to take that 10% of a risk to lose Armenia that we know. Of course, there will be an Armenia. But what does it mean to have an Armenia like Belarus? There will be a pro-Russian somebody like Lukashenko taking the power. What does it mean? Isn't it going to hurt you? It's going to hurt me, of course. We are dreaming of a strong, democratic, resilient Armenia. That is our dream. It's not about Mr. Pashinyan or this or that. It's about Armenia. So we need to act now. We need to act. Two things to make Armenia strong. Did I sound like somebody? Whatever. Great, whatever. Or to deter the coming catastrophes. Now, how can we do that? Because we are only 2.5 million people in the middle of autocracies. We cannot be that strong in 1-2 years. But we can make peace with our neighbors. We can open the borders. We should be in favor of it, even pragmatically. Even if you don't believe it, believe me, pragmatically, it is the right way to help Armenia, to be in favor of peace, to open the border, to have people-to-people interaction. That is the right way. That is the right approach. Thank you.
Sorry, the question on the top, and then we'll go to the. Sorry.
Mr. Paylan, first off, thank you. Thank you for being here, for honoring Hrant Dink's memory, and for everything that you do yourself.
Thank you.
I can't imagine the hostile community you grew up in and the realities you had to face at such a young age. I myself grew up in England, and my parents grew up in Iran and faced different experiences that shared some similarities. You've been operating in a hostile environment for a very long time, particularly in the Turkish parliament. And I wonder, how have you found allies among the parliament? How have you bridged that hatred? And what can you teach us about that and how we can live that through in our own lives? Because we all carry our own hatred in some ways because of the past, and which has been reignited by recent wars and the genocide in Artsakh and so on.
Yeah. When I first entered the parliament, everybody was looking at me, literally, really. And because most of them really didn't see an Armenian in their life. Maybe I was the first person for most of them they saw as an Armenian, And then of course, we started to chat, we started to talk, and they asked me about, because I was vocal about Armenian history. I said we coexisted here, we used to live together. I gave examples about some cities, Tokat, Marash, Urfa, and others. And those MPs from those cities came and asked me, Garo, did Armenians really exist in Tokat? Did Armenians really exist in this city, that city? And they asked me, and I just delivered some books and some things that saying that look, and then they came, like this. They said, you know what? The mosque that I was praying all my life was a church, an Armenian church, and I didn't know that, converted to a mosque. Can you believe in that? A mosque, you are praying, it's a historic building, and you are praying there, and you don't know that it was a church, it was an Armenian church, no. Those kind of things. But there were really, you only saw some scenes about me lynching, they were lynching me, therefore there were crazy ones as well. But I had good relations with most of them. But when it comes to talking about Armenian genocide, they become like a bull, seeing the red, carpet just attacking me. It happened. It happens. People-to-people attraction is very important. And as you know, there were several Armenians in the Ottoman parliament. And I told this. There is a holiday in the Muslim holidays, let's say. Why don't you just establish a holiday at Christmas or Easter? It was great. And let's say during the parliamentarian session, one time, they gave a break for a Sunday Christian ceremony. This was a good step. Those kind of steps happened. But this needs to follow with policy, of course. And one Garo Paylan is not enough. One Hrant Dink is not enough. And we need to show them that we are from there. We are not outsiders. We are from Marash, Urfa, and other cities. And I always told this, and Hrant Dink told the same thing. We are not diaspora. You call us the diaspora. Our ancestors are from there, and we are living there, and we will live there. We want to live there. Hrant Dink's sentence was that I want to live there, and we need to show that we want to coexist there. That is what I tried to do. Of course, there were so many bad days, but good days were more than the bad days in the Turkish parliament. Thank you.
Hi, Barav says.
First
First of all, I just want to thank you for coming here. The sense of urgency you had in your talk came across very well. I had like a situation that I wanted to bring across and see if maybe we could get your opinions on it. So recently at our college, we had a new club introduced called the Turkish Student Association. And they've been reaching out to the Armenia Club for collaboration events. But at the same time, we have a little bit of a moral issue because on their social pages, they keep praising people like Ataturk and different people during the genocide, which for us is just like a little bit tough to kind of move past that. So I was wondering if you have any guidance on how to approach a situation like that.
You know what? I was born in a neighborhood where the street names was, the perpetrators of the Armenian genocide in Kurtuluş. And there was a school in the middle of that neighborhood called Talat Pasha School. Can you believe most of the Armenians live in that neighborhood, and they put the names of the perpetrators of the Armenian genocide? So this is Turkey, unfortunately, and this is what they taught. No, they taught Talat Pasha and Enver Pasha were heroes. They had to do this. So other than the other policies, they had to send the Armenians away. And that is why they all teach this, they all say he was a hero to the new generations. So if you don't engage with that club, that will go on like that. But if you start a dialogue, if you start a conversation, you can tell about what you know about Turkish history. What is your perception? What is your understanding? And they can tell about their perception, and you can share these things, and you can come to a point. This is a possibility. But if you don't engage, they will go on like this, and it is not in our favor. Believe in that. It was in our favor. I would say you might forget about it. Even I would not recommend this, but again, you should think that this is in our favor to end this hatred cycle. So you had better engage with them. Thank you.
On that note, a question from online. Is there a place, a center, a platform to work on, brainstorm for projects that emphasize what we Turks and Armenians have in common? Talk about the real history. There are individuals who would like to make their lives more meaningful by not surrendering to tyranny, by working side by side with Armenians. Are there any outlets for these people? So
there were a lot of institutions really during that window of opportunity. As I said, civil society was so much active in Turkey, but now it's not that much active anymore. We need to really help them. But you can say this. You have two choices. You can say, just like they told to Hrant or myself, saying that Turk is a Turk. Turks will never change. This is the common perception. Turks is a Turk. Turk will never change. Then they will never change, as I told you. But if you say, no, if we engage, if we establish new institutions, there is a foundation called History Foundation. Other institutions still are active, but they are not so much active now. But if we engage, if we give power to them, I guess it is so much beneficial for our question. Thank you.
Right, more questions from the audience. Oh,
put on your mic for the Zoom people.
for Zoom people. Right. This one is on, yes. Oh, if there are no more questions from the room, we're actually past 6. We would really love to thank such an exceptional speaker.
Thank you.
Say